On today's show, we're going to discuss all things rental rates. How do you calculate CPI? Where do you find CPI? And what are the rental rates in your area for the second quarter of 2023? Stay tuned. Hi, this is Chris German. Welcome back to the Apartment Dealer Show. Today, it's all things rental rates. It is time. The new data is out for 2023, the new CPI readings. And we're going to discuss where do you find that data? How do you calculate your rental increase? Which cities have special measures in place? And then what are the exact rental rates in the cities of which you own? That's what we're going to discuss today. Now, before we get there, let's discuss the market when it comes to rental rates in general. If you've had a vacancy of late, and personally, I've had a couple. I've had one in Los Angeles County. I've had one in San Bernardino County at two of my different locations. So I get a sampling of what's going on in both areas, and it's about the same. From my experience, and then speaking with our clients, vacancies are taking longer to fill. That's just the reality of what it is today. Why is that? I couldn't really tell you. I don't have that data in terms of, what happened? What happened, say, the beginning of this year to where we are now, June of 2023? Why, where'd the people go, in other words, right? Now, we're still getting plenty of people showing up at the showings. And if you've seen videos of my rentals, you know that they're top line. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying there's something to be said about we're not renting average units. These are units that have been renovated, remodeled, that are updated and so forth. And even still, we get a lot of people coming through, interested, and yet not as many applications. So first, vacancies are taking longer to fill. Second, I would say that the clientele base, something has happened in terms of the clientele. Now, maybe this is just my own experience, but in both locations, regardless of county, credit scores were not there, work history was not there. A lot of people made bad decisions during COVID, maybe not paying bills, they weren't working, now they don't have the work history. And I don't know what you use as your criteria to rent your units, but there's just some basics that we utilize, and it's been tough of late to find people that meet those parameters. With respect to that, depending on how stiff your requirements are and less of a pool of potential tenants, obviously then the rentals are staying vacant longer, and that means your carrying cost is increasing. Even if you own your building free and clear, there's still carrying cost, right? Well, if you're vacant 1 month, maybe 6 weeks, 7, 8 weeks, 2 months, well, there's a cost to that. So that cost has increased. Now, the rental rates in general. So we're going to share with you what's been the pace of rental increases. But of late, what we're seeing in the open market is that while rental rates are still strong, much stronger than they were, say, even than 2 years ago, the pace at which rental rates are increasing has definitely slowed. And we have now watched this quarter after quarter, and we're going to give you some hard data. But nonetheless, rental rates aren't increasing at the pace that they once were. But that's more to be expected just because rental rates are so high as of today. If you've watched any of our educational content, been to our live educational events, you know that tenants are spending well over 50% of their discretionary income to pay rent. So we always knew, they're not going to spend, 60, 70% of their discretionary income. So at some point there was a ceiling. Looks like we're just about there in terms of the rental rates. So how do you get your units filled? Now, if you're one of our personal clients and you've been to one of our live events, then by now you already have my report, 78 Ways to Fill Your Vacancy. And that report wasn't very popular, say the last 3 years, because simply put, people didn't need it, right? You probably had next to no vacancies, or if you did, they filled right up. Now that report is going to become more popular, just like it was, say, a decade ago. But here's a couple quick takeaways I would give you. Number one, where are you advertising your rentals. If you're on Craigslist, you're dead in the water. If you're on Facebook rentals, you're dead in the water. The number one place today, I would say, and the most affordable because it's essentially free or you can pay for a slight upgrade, is Zillow. Zillow seems to be the one-stop shop because they distribute their listings to Trulia and HotPads plus Zillow.com that tenants are going to see your rental available. If somebody's looking for a place to live, they're bound to bump into your rental simply by you posting it on Zillow. And of course, I have no affiliation. I wish they were paying me for this, a referral. But that's what we use. Now, in terms of using Zillow, there's a couple of things to keep in mind to use it effectively. Number one, good photos. All of us today walk around with an iPhone or similar in our pocket. And nowadays, the technology, those pictures are going to be just as good as you had a high quality Canon or camera or something like that. So you should have a good enough camera in your pocket. Just make sure the lighting's done well, of course the unit's clean, get different angles and so forth, have plenty of pictures so that your pictures will tell the tenant a story. Because many people, as you know, are making decisions simply based upon when they're scrolling, what is it that they see on the screen of their phone or on the screen of their computer. That's how they're making their decision. So if you only have 3 photos, well, that's going to hurt you. Better to have 10 and say 12 is better than 10. But have a handful of photos so that the tenant can feel like, okay, I have a good sense of the space, the size, the quality, and so forth. Second, I would say when you're in the Zillow app, you have the ability of those people that message you, that they inquire about the unit. You can actually get their phone number, okay? So if you're looking at, and we'll show you kind of like a screenshot here, but if you're looking at Zillow.com on your desktop, when you go to the messages and you click on a particular message and it shows you that individual and you hit call, once you hit call, their phone number comes up. What I like to do, and it does take some time, is of course I reply to them through the Zillow app, which will essentially send them either an email or a text message, but that's going to look like it was auto-generated. I also send them a text message from my cell phone, and you'd be surprised how many more people respond to that message aside of just what's coming from Zillow. The other thing that I do within the text message is, aside of responding to whatever their question may be, this is the day and time of the showing, here's my criteria, so forth, I also then repost or recopy the link to the rental so they know which rental it is. Because if you know the other side of this app, tenants can easily just scroll along and click, I'm interested on a whole bunch of rentals, not knowing which one's responding. So I include the link to my rental so they know specifically like, oh, okay, this seems to be more hands-on. The owner, the manager seems to be more hands-on. I'm getting a human response, right? People still, as much as we want to be on our devices, when you're renting from someone, you want to know who you're renting from. And so many people appreciate that. I have found that increases the number of people that actually show up at the showing. Now, let's talk about your showings. The way that I coordinate showing an apartment unit is I do not book appointments, because if you've been through the experience that you book an appointment, you drive halfway across town in traffic, and lo and behold, they don't show up. So what I do is typically I'll show the rental unit 2 to 3 times a week. I'll maybe show it Tuesday evening from 6 to 7:30, Thursday evening, 6 to 7:30, and then Saturday morning, say 10 to 11:30. And I post the time within the Zillow ad. I also respond with those time frames. And then they know that they can just show up at any time within that time, that window of time. And I'm going to be at the property anyways. Maybe I'm cleaning up a little bit, just looking around, getting some work done while I'm in the unit, what have you. But then two things. Number one, I'm not just showing up for one person. I think that's very inefficient. No matter what they tell you on the phone, I'm the best tenant, I need to rent a place now, I'm ready to go, I have your money. I don't care what they say. What if they don't show up? Okay. But if you have the experience like I normally do, where now for about at least an hour of that hour and a half, I have a line of people, and I only allow one at a time so that they each get to take in the space on their own. So let one person in at a time. You got 2 or 3 people in your unit, that is not effective. It might go faster for you, but are we talking about expediency, or are we talking about renting your unit to the highest and best qualified tenant, right? One person at a time. They'll stand in line. They're not going to go anywhere. Don't fear, right? And then we, for an hour and a half, we show the unit. What it also does to the psychology of the tenant, potential tenant, is, well, gosh, I'm not the only person that showed up to this party. If I really have interest, I best get my application turned in. The other thing that I do is I do not accept applications through the app. I don't accept applications if they haven't seen my rental, because that will be another waste of time. They may apply, and even if they qualify, but now it's time for them to actually come see the unit and they haven't seen it before. What if they don't like it? I had a young lady show up the other day and say, well, there's not enough closet space. You couldn't believe the size of the closet that I have in this particular unit. It wasn't enough for her. Well, good. I didn't waste time reviewing an application and doing credit checks and employment checks and talking with previous landlords of hers. I hadn't done anything. She showed up, made a decision for herself. Great. You've chosen not to rent my unit, and that's best for the both of us. But those who come to the showing, that's how you get an application. I say in the ad, the only way you're going to get an application for this unit is you must show up at the showing. And plenty of people ask, well, I can't come. Can you just send it to me? I saw it. I saw the pictures. I love it. Please send it to me. Sorry. You want to rent the unit? We got to shake hands. We're going to put a name to the face, and I'm going to give you an application in person. That's just the way I do it. Now, you might have a much better system. Matter of fact, if you think that you have a better system or I can improve, share in the comments below in the video. I'd love to tweak what I'm already doing and make it better. I'm just sharing with you, this is what I've always done in our rentals. And that's why we, any particular building you show up at that I own, a great tenant base, there's just, no drama. We want drama-free rentals. Now, let's talk about quality of the unit. So if you've been subscribed to our channel for any length of time, you know that a lot of time we spend on is discussing, well, who is your next tenant? Your next tenant, very likely, because they're the largest segment of the population, is a millennial. Well, if you want an individual who has a good job, makes good income, has good credit, right? They're going to stay a while. They're not going to buy a home anytime soon. You pretty much have checked the box of a millennial. But guess what? A millennial wants a modernized unit. So we'll link here to a couple of the videos that I've done on some of my own remodels, so you can kind of get a sense of what a modernized unit is. But modernized units are becoming the norm. This is your competition. If you still have linoleum and carpet, and I'm not saying, I'm your choice, but I'm just saying there's plenty of rentals in the market now. So many landlords have revamped their units to have tile and quartz and better finish material and fixtures and so forth. This is your competition. One of the suggestions that I give in my report on the 78 ways to fill vacancies is go and look on Zillow for other rentals available in your area. Visit some of these units. Take a look at, well, what have other landlords done to their units? How much are they asking? That is essentially your competition. So now let's talk about, well, how do you calculate your next rental increase? So if you're in California, your building is under rent control, okay? Now, I know for some of you, this is still the first time you're hearing this. I don't know how. It's been like this since 2019, but I'm glad we could inform you. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. But if you own a multifamily property that was built prior to 1996, and it's 2 units or more, and you don't dwell in one of the units, guess what? Your property is under rent control. There are limitations on how much you can raise your rents. Well, so then how do we know how much? In general, unless you own in a city that has a special ordinance of its own, and we're going to discuss some of those. But in general, all the other cities have this stipulation. As of today, the recording of the video, you can raise your rental rates by 5% plus the change in CPI, Consumer Price Index, inflation essentially. Okay, 5% plus CPI. Now, how do you find the CPI? CPI based on when, okay, and where? So the CPI is going to be based upon, number one, where the rental is located. So what you're going to do, and we'll put a link here, is you're going to go to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and you're going to find the inflation index for the county of which your rental is located. Then what you're looking at for this year, say, is April of 2023. What that is showing you is the change in inflation over the last year, year over year. So for LA County, that change is 3.8%. So if you own a building in LA County, not LA City, not some of the special cities I'm going to discuss here in a second, not in unincorporated areas, okay, everywhere else in LA County, it's 5% plus 3.8. That means you can raise your rents 8.8%. Now, I'm going to pause here and say, double check the website, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for yourself. Don't just go based on this video. Who knows if this could change? Maybe they go in and edit it. I don't want you to run afoul and calculate this incorrectly. I just had a client do that because I don't know what they were looking at. So anyways, that's how it's calculated. How often can you raise your rental rates? You can raise them multiple times in a year. You just can't raise it more. Total, 10%. So there's a 10% ceiling. In other words, let's say CPI was 7%. Hey, we say, well, 6 plus 5, that's 11. Well, sorry. There's a 10% ceiling in the statewide rent control bill, AB 1482, if you want to look it up. So that's your ceiling, okay? And your floor essentially is 5% if there was no change in CPI, if inflation was flat. So that's where we are. Now, let's talk about some of the special cities here that some of you may own in. I'm going to speak specific to some of the communities that we service where we have clientele that owns. First up, Bell Gardens. In the city of Bell Gardens, I want to make sure I get this right here. Okay, totally different rules. The city of Bell Gardens, since October or so of last year, says this: you're allowed to raise your rental rates 4% or half of the change in CPI, whichever is less. Can you imagine? Well, what does that mean? Let's say CPI was 6%, okay? So they're saying 4% or the change in CPI. Well, 6 is more than 4, so it would be 4%. 4% would be the maximum you could raise your rents in Bell Gardens because it's whatever is less, not which one is more. So for second quarter 2023 of the recording of this video, I just mentioned LA County CPI 3.8%. So then that means that you would take half of 3.8 because that's going to be less than 4. That's how much you can raise your rental rates this year, if you can imagine. Sorry to tell you. How about the city of Cudahy? Cudahy just passed its own ordinance, which states that it's either 3% or the change in CPI, whichever is less. You guessed it. So 3% versus 3.8%, guess what? 3% is less. If you own in Cudahy, you get to raise your rents a whopping 3%. So if you take into consideration how much materials have gone up, if you've done a remodel, any construction work at all, even at your own home, you know that materials are up 20, 30, 40%, depending on what we're talking about. Labor has gone up easily, say 75%. If you're paying individuals on a day-by-day basis or per project or what have you. Labor, gentlemen that used to work for $150 a day, maybe now want $250 to $300 a day. So what am I getting at? These increases are not going to keep pace with the cost, and not to mention the cost of water going up, electricity, gas, if you happen to pay any of the utilities at any of your properties. So just keep that in mind. How about Baldwin Park? Baldwin Park says 5%. That's your ceiling. How about unincorporated Los Angeles County? 3%. Now, the good news, if you own an unincorporated Los Angeles County, which is like East LA and other areas, unincorporated Los Angeles County. There's even parts of Whittier that's considered unincorporated, parts of Monterey Park. It's interesting that what I would have thought were independent cities, even within these independent cities, sometimes there's a part of it of which resides in an unincorporated county area. You better check if you don't know with respect to your property. But in unincorporated LA County, up until here this year, you couldn't raise your rents a dime the last 3 years. So if that's news to you, let me say that again. If you owned an unincorporated LA County There was a rent freeze for the last several years. You should check their website. And if you happen to have raised your rents, technically you're supposed to pull those rental increases back. Now, you could run in the gray area. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but you should watch my interview with Dennis Block, and I posed that question to him, and this was early on in the early days of when rent control first passed. That question that was on a lot of people, I won't say everyone's mind, but some landlords' mind, hey, who's going to track how much I raise my rents? Is there the rent control police? Is someone going to come knock on my door? Probably not, unless you own in some of these cities, because actually they have rent registries and the whole bit. But no, maybe not. But if you end up in a eviction case, a court battle, tenant finds out 5 years from now, and now you've been miscalculating these rental increases, could be troublesome for you. I would watch that interview that I did with Dennis Block, hear it from the attorney, not from me. Now, I mentioned the rent registries. In many of these cities with the special ordinances, you have to register your rentals, which oftentimes means you tell them the name of the tenant of who resides there, how much they currently pay, your personal information, and you got to update this annually. So it's an invasion of private property, in my opinion, but nonetheless, these are the rules. And so that's what we have to abide by. Last note that I'll say as of the recording of this video, City of Maywood has a rental freeze in place as they determine what is it that they may do in the way of their own rent control ordinance. Pasadena, Proposition H. I just listened to a lengthy webinar with Mike Brennan, who you've seen on my show. He was on a different webinar, but he was outlining Measure H, and it's just horrific what Pasadena is doing with respect to their rental ordinances. So none that I hear Alhambra might do something soon. So anyways, if you're unsure of the city that you own in, if they have a special ordinance, call. Don't, I asked the attorneys one time, well, can you claim ignorance? Because many of these cities, it's not like they're sending a flyer to your address saying, hey, here's the new rules. Many people find out by speaking with me, watching this show, and they never heard it before that maybe there's rent control in their city. The attorney said, well, it's your responsibility as the landlord to know the rules. You cannot claim ignorance. So call your city if you're unsure, but it's time to raise rents. Now more than ever, you have to raise your rents. I guess you don't have to. Let me back up. My opinion, Chris's opinion. You should be raising your rental rates as much as you can to the ceilings that exist because they affect your cash flow, number one. And number two, it's going to affect the value of your property. You may not be thinking about selling today, but down the road, if you want to cash out or refinance, the amount of loan dollars you get is going to be determined by, guess what? Your rental income. When you go to sell down the road, even though you know that market rents are XYZ in the area, it's going to have an impact on the value of your property. So my suggestion would be, because I saw a lot of buildings for clients who didn't do a good job in raising the rental rates, it impacts the value. Raise your rents. You're not doing anyone, you're only doing yourself a disservice, I should say, by not doing so and calculating based upon what would be the maximum increases. Now, many of you have done a good job and you have very high rental rates. So to do 5% plus CPI would be too much. And I have some of that in my own buildings. So I don't always do 5% plus CPI if I'm already nearly at market, but I do something. And I learned this from Steven Spear, the real estate attorney who you've seen on this show. He said you do something, even if it's $5 a year, because you want the tenants to get used to the fact that this landlord raises rents and they don't come to you with a sad story later on. And they're just used to, you know what? Hey, usually about this time of year, my landlord raises my rents and lo and behold, hey, good news, it's only $5 because maybe this year you're very close to market rate. Next year, maybe it's $75 because now there's been a big jump in rents, but nonetheless, you stay close to market. You keep your cash flow up. You keep your building value up. That's very important in pillar one of the financial legacy, right? Pillar one, that's building value from within. And this is of utmost important, especially now that the new indexes are out. So now, that was a lot of info, but I wanted to give you the whole backstory, if you will, before we get into the actual rental rates. Now, If you watch any of our market update videos, the way that I chunk down the information, first and foremost, the information that I'm going to give you is not for the entire state of California. It's not even for all of Southern California. It's particular to those communities that my team and I service, where we represent landlords in the purchase and sale of multifamily properties, and or I also own multifamily properties in some of these communities. So we also, have that hands-on experience as landlords ourselves. These corridors, in case you're not familiar with them, is first I chunk it down by the East Los Angeles corridor, which it's going to consist of Boyle Heights, East LA, El Sereno. The 710-91 corridor, Bell Gardens, Commerce, Cudahy, Huntington Park, Maywood, Paramount, and Southgate. The West San Gabriel Valley corridor, Alhambra, Arcadia, Monterey Park, Rosemead, San Gabriel, Temple City. The East San Gabriel corridor, Azusa, Baldwin Park, Covina, El Monte, Glendora, Laverne, Monrovia, South El Monte, West Covina. The 605 corridor, Bellflower, Downey, La Habra, La Mirada, La Puente, Lakewood, Montebello, Norwalk, Paramount, Pico Rivera, Whittier. The Inland Empire West, Chino, Claremont, Montclair, Ontario, Pomona, Rancho Cucamonga, Upland. The Inland Empire East, Bloomington, Colton, Fontana, Rialto, and finally, the city of Riverside. Why do we chunk them down this way? Because typically the tenant base is very similar, values are very similar in general, rental rates are very close, so that's why we chunk them down this way. It allows me to disseminate the information to you a little bit more efficiently. So now, I'm going to give you each of these slides. You can pause the video, grab the city you're looking for, the bedroom type. That'll give you the average. Now, thhere does Chris get his data? 3 places. CoStar, which is an independent third party that collects data, all things commercial real estate. Zillow, which I mentioned, which we use to place our own ads for our own rentals. And then Rent-O-Meter, which is a paid service they survey, it's a third party, and they survey the local area to find what are the current asking rates and the rates that rentals are being filled. We collect that and find the averages. So these are averages. So you're going to see, for example, in the East Los Angeles corridor, the average for a 1-bedroom is $1,783. I'm not suggesting that if you have a vacant 1-bedroom that you run an ad for $1,783. Please round the numbers, but this gives you just an average for the area, and then it gives you a more specific for the individual cities, such as a 3-bedroom in El Sereno, we found in the data collected currently is $2,595. The 710-91 corridor, so we have, say, a studio, $1,448, versus a 2-bedroom in Cudahy, $2,073. So again, we have all our cities here in the 710-91 corridor. The West San Gabriel Valley, we take, for example, say Rosemead, we have everything from a studio at $1,563, ranging up to a 3-bedroom at $2,788. The East San Gabriel Valley, I'll use Baldwin Park because I just mentioned, they have a stiff rent control in place there. Baldwin Park, you have everything from a studio, $1,610, 1-bedrooms at $1,763, 2-bedrooms at $2,223, 3-bedrooms at $2,945. Now, I will say, many landlords are collecting well beyond these rates. How? It's based upon the quality of the unit. That's how. Because remember, it boils down back to what I said earlier, the competition. What quality of units are you competing against? And I'm not suggesting the new construction units, because those type of units that have the indoor gym and the pool on the roof and all this stuff, new construction, you're not competing with them, many of you. You're competing with the other mom and pops local in the area. These are those rents. And so then for those people that are collecting a higher rent, for example, I have a client in Baldwin Park, 1-bedrooms, they're collecting like $1,900. Why? That's well above the $1,763. Why? Those units were recently rehabbed. The 605 corridor, let's take Whittier, for example. So we have studios at $1,513, 1-bedrooms at $1,800, 2-bedrooms at $2,275, 3-bedrooms at $2,773. Now, the Inland Empire, for many of you that say only are familiar with LA County, the rental rates are much higher than you would expect. Let's say for Ontario, a studio, $1,500, a 1-bedroom, $1,760, 2-bedrooms, $2,148, 3-bedrooms, $2,773. And I can attest personally to these rental rates. So I know for many of you, you think, well, gosh, those are quite significant for Ontario. The rents, if you've followed our videos, you know that the Inland Empire have grown like a hockey stick, have increased, I should say, like a hockey stick since COVID. And it really has been the path of growth. Rental rates are really aggressive in the Inland Empire, both west and east, but west is more expensive than east. But in the east, let's say Fontana, studios at $14.13, 1 bedrooms $15.60, 2 bedrooms $18.38, 3 bedrooms $25.73. And then we'll finish up with the city of Riverside, studio $15.95, all the way up to a 3 bedroom at $27.23. Now let's discuss what's the trajectory of rental rates and vacancy, because I think it's important to know where we've come from and where we're headed. So now we're solely relying on CoStar data. Again, CoStar is that third party that all they do is collect analytics for commercial real estate. Since they're independent of myself, they have their own corridors. They have the way they chunk down the information. They actually put many more cities together. That helps them be more efficient. Just so you understand that the corridors are different, but we're going to go through this with you. So their first corridor is the Southeast Los Angeles multifamily submarket. This corridor, as they have it broken down, is Bell Gardens, Boyle Heights, Commerce, Downey, East Los Angeles, El Sereno, Huntington Park, La Mirada, Maywood, Montebello, Pico Rivera, Southgate, and Whittier. So it's a whole big chunk of the map. Okay. Well, what are we looking at? Well, let's take a look at first vacancy rates. If you take a look at vacancy, say fourth quarter of 2022, we were at 2.8%. And now we've edged up to 3%. That's currently where we are. So that's a much different experience than where we just came from, where we probably were like, say, 1% or slightly over 1%. So the point is vacancy is increasing. Hence my comments earlier about rentals taking a little bit longer to fill. They're going to get full. There's no need for concessions and these sorts of things yet, but vacancy has edged up. This is real data. It's not just something we're feeling, it's reality. The annual rental growth rate of 2022, rental rates grew by 5.4%. Let's take it now to the second quarter, 2.8%. So as I mentioned, the rise in rental rates, it's slowing. Now remember, this is based upon quarter after quarter. So when you already have historically high rental rates, of course, they're only going to edge up slightly. We're not going to continue. We were never going to continue to see 5% quarter after quarter, right? It would just take the rental rates too high. But that's the reality of where they are in this submarket. In the South Los Angeles multifamily submarket, Bellflower, Lakewood, Norwalk, and Paramount, what do we have? We have vacancy that started out at 2.5% to where we are now, almost 4%. That's a big swing in this, in half a year, right? That's a big swing. Annual rental growth, we went from 4.9 to 2.1, right? So again, no matter where we're talking about in general, vacancy is going up, rental growth rate is slowing down. The San Gabriel Valley multifamily submarket, Alhambra, Arcadia, Azusa, Baldwin Park, Claremont, Covina, El Monte, Glendora, La Puente, Monrovia, Monterey Park, Pomona, Rosemead, San Gabriel, Temple City, West Covina. We've gone now not as big of a difference, right? So, well, number one, they already started out kind of high, 3.8% relative to most areas, kind of a higher end of the vacancy spectrum. Now they're at 4%, and the rental rates have slowed from 3.9%, right? So what does that mean again? That the rental rates grew in the fourth quarter compared to the third quarter of 2022 by 3.9%. Here, most recently, growing at a pace of 2.2%. The Greater Ontario Rancho multifamily submarket, Chino, Montclair, Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga, Upland, we have vacancy that's actually gone down. And that's what we would anticipate to see, because this has been kind of a common thread. People moving east, 5.8% down to 5.4%. And annual rental growth, though, while it was already dismal, rental rates, according to this data, actually shows that they've pulled back slightly in this particular market. So they're filling the units, but they're having to take a little bit of cut in rate in order to get these places full. Is kind of how I would read this. The Greater San Bernardino multifamily submarket, Bloomington, Colton, Fontana, Rialto. Vacancy has crept up because they're a little bit further east, right? So the sweet spot about the Western Inland Empire, let's say, is they're close enough to LA County to drive and commute for LA County jobs. Once you get to the eastern tip of the Inland Empire, They probably work and live both in the vicinity, so then employment, hourly rates are less and so forth. But at any rate, second quarter, they were 3.4%. Vacancy has edged up to 4.2%. And annual rental growth, though, is still increasing, but it has gone from 5.4% the end of last year to now 2.8%. And then in the city of Riverside, vacancy 5.3% up to 6.7%. And rents have really pulled back. Previously, they were growing, say, at a clip of 3%. Now they've actually retracted some, and that's the story of Riverside. We've discussed how to raise our rents. How do we determine how much we can raise our rents? We need to call our city, see if there's any special rules in place, who our most likely tenant is, how to show units, advertise units, and then lastly, this idea of, well, how do I get more? How do I get more rental rates? How do I push those rental rates? I want to push my cash flow. I want to push the value of my property. In other words, I want to push the value of my financial legacy. The name of the game is tenant, or I should say unit improvements that tenants will appreciate. Remodeled units. And I know that in a world of rent control, maybe you're not coming across vacancies. How do you get in the unit and remodel them? Well, that's a different conversation of, is it an opportunity for you to vacate the units, which you can still do, but does it make sense? Does it make financial sense to vacate the unit? Now, I'm not saying to pay the tenants $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 to vacate. Don't do that. I've never done that. There's times when that makes sense, but what I'm discussing here is under the statewide rent control bill, AB 1482, you can still give notices to tenants, 60-day notices to vacate, so long as you're going to do substantial improvements, do those improvements, and then bring your rental rates to market. So if you looked at some of these rental rates, you're saying, gosh, I'm getting half of what Chris is saying market level is. You're probably a prime candidate to look at something like that. Maybe vacating units through a substantial improvement clause is something to look at. Now, there's individuals that specialize in having those conversations with the tenants. If you're uncomfortable having that conversation in terms of vacating a unit, even if you touch base with our office, we can refer you to someone local if you own here locally that essentially does that, the tenant agreements. But aside of that, I'm saying maybe you don't draft the notice, maybe you don't post the notice, maybe you hire an eviction attorney, someone like Mike Brennan, who you've seen me interview on this show. You could pay Mike to draft the 60-day notice to vacate. You could pay Mike to post the notice. And that's what we do when we're in this situation. And then of that 60 days, about the 30th day in, we have Mike draft a simple letter basically saying, dear Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, 30 days ago, you were given this notice. We're at the 30-day mark. You have 30 days to go. Be prepared to move. That puts the tenant on notice that we're not playing. We do expect that they will vacate on that 60th day. And we have somebody hand in hand with us, a legal attorney at our side, should they choose to go the distance. So that's just something I wanted to mention there. I hope you found this information informative. I also failed to mention, if you go to raisemyrents.com, raisemyrents.com, all the rental rates that I shared are in one simple to print PDF for all the cities in these various corridors. That's my gift to you. Again, just go to raisemyrents.com. I'm sure we'll put a link here. You can download the PDF, yours to keep. And my team and I are updating that once every quarter. We just released the new numbers for quarter 2. So take advantage of that. I will also mention coming up here shortly, probably within another week or two, we're going to do our second quarter market update. I'm going to walk you through the sales in your cities of which you own, assuming you own in an area that we service. What are properties selling for? Price per unit, price per square foot, cap rate. What's the highest sale that's taken place? Let's talk some strategy. In a world of higher interest rates and bad news and what have you, how do you turn a dollar in multifamily? We're going to be releasing our market update video soon. Stay tuned. So if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. Turn on alerts so that you get alerted when we share that video. Look, there's no propaganda on this channel. Scroll down, watch any video that you like. Hundreds of hours of content. What you'll find is it's all educational. That's my gift to you. We want to ensure that we're providing that information to our clients first and then landlords at large so that you feel empowered and you're making decisions based upon facts and figures and not emotion and fake news is about the way I would boil it down. Chris German from the Apartment Dealer wishing you positive cash flow, tenants who behave, and much protection from Uncle Sam. I will see you at our market update video. See you then.